I'm back with my husband, Chris.
Hi, Mel.
Hi, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And I was just sharing with everybody that when I first stumbled upon this high five habit and I started doing it, and then I asked you if you would try it for 5 days. Do you remember that?
Definitely. And I said NFW.
Well, you did have a very deliberate, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I immediately thought it was the dumbest idea ever. I found it ludicrous, quite honestly. Let's go to the mirror. Let's high five ourselves. And this is going to solve all problems.
Well, I'm not saying it's going to solve all problems, but I know based on the research and I know based on the testimonials of 175,000 people and the testimonials that roll in every single freaking day that are so profound that when you take on this habit, it has a shocking impact on your brain and how you see yourself and the person in the mirror. And that kicks open a door to an entirely new set of habits and an entirely new possibility. And, we're laughing, but when I kept pushing you, because I'm like, dude, you're my husband. I need you to try this. I want you to take the high five challenge. I want you to do this for 5 days. You shared with me something that I didn't know. And the real reason why you thought this was stupid, when you dug a little deeper, it was really sad. And honestly, it was scary to hear as your spouse. So would you share with everybody sort of the deeper insight as to why you kind of had that reaction?
I think at the time I related to the idea of a high five to myself as being encouragement, like looking forward. The idea that you would high five yourself to inspire forward action. And yet I find that the power of that high five in the mirror is less your hand meeting the mirror and more your eyes meeting your eyes. And that's where the struggle was. Because when I took that challenge on, I remember really the high five was easy. The looking at myself in the mirror, that was not easy.
Why? Can I hold your hand?
I think it was not easy because there was so much reflection on the past. I was looking back. I was not seeing somebody that deserved a high five. I saw failure. I saw upset. I saw just not living up to the expectation that I think I had set for myself. And I'm sure that society's expectations were also influencing that. But just where I was at the time, I didn't feel like I deserved that high five. So I think that was probably the underlying reason why my reaction to the idea of doing it was, this is stupid. When the truth is that I was not happy with myself and didn't think a high five was deserved.
It's really hard to hear how long you felt that way about yourself. Because I stood next to you for years, the sink right next to you. And when I looked at you, like I saw the world's best dad, amazing husband. I saw somebody who was absolutely integral to helping me build my business. I felt grateful for you. I didn't know you thought any of those things. You just kind of put on a smile and carried on. You were so sort of stoic about it. So can you explain, because I think that there's a lot of people, especially men, that really beat the hell out of themselves when their career doesn't go how they thought it was going to go, or they get laid off, or, you become an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurship looks fucking glamorous. It's a bitch, especially in the restaurant business. And you had been an entrepreneur. So can you just share just a little bit of context for people so they understand like how long you would look in the mirror and see somebody that failed and why you felt that way?
Oh, it had to have been 15 years anyway.
15 years?
Oh yeah, no, I don't think it was just the unraveling of the restaurant business that was the beginning of that. I think that I'm not sure exactly when, but as you and I know, like looking back on my very colorful career, I am grateful today for all of the things that I did, but having moved through so many different roles and responsibilities and industries and companies and
job changes,
and I just never ever related to myself like I was succeeding in a professional sense. And I, of course, concluded that therein lies the source of my failure, because my job here is to be the provider, the proverbial provider, and to go, quote, make it happen. And so the discomfort with myself and my progress professionally was absolutely what I think dragged me down. And yeah, being an entrepreneur can seem glamorous. I would say that at the time when this whole thing and the High Five Challenge or the book came out, you and I we were in the throes of it. I mean, talk about just getting up and putting on your boots and just diving into the fire every day. There wasn't, at least just didn't seem like there was a moment to actually stop and acknowledge the good. And quite frankly, you weren't acknowledging me like that. You might have seen me as a good husband or father or, business partner, but those words weren't being shared between us. And so naturally, I didn't get that reinforcement verbally from you. But I also think that the being in the thick of it and running as fast and as hard as we were didn't, the idea of stopping and looking in the mirror and seeing myself truly for who I am and the good that I have done and acknowledging all the failures as being a source of powerful learning and all that stuff. Fuck that. Like I wasn't, and that's why I say, I think the hardest part was to stand in front of that mirror and see your whole self. And for guys, I think that is, for many, borderline feels impossible. Because that's what we do. We just get up, put the boots on, and go, okay, Mel needs something, the wife needs something, the kids need something, the employer needs something.
The dogs.
Okay, let me jam in a quick workout. Maybe because maybe I'm thoughtful about what my mind, body, or spirit needs, but also something that I think is an afterthought for guys. And we put everybody but ourselves first. So the act of standing in front of a mirror and high-fiving yourself and looking yourself in the eyes and saying, I love you, outlandish concept, but hugely, hugely important. And it doesn't happen unless you're sort of willing to really stop and slow down and consider that you matter more than your wife, your kids, your employer, the rest of it. And I think that's part of what has, I think maybe over the years, dragged me down, was paying zero attention to me and paying all the attention, or so I felt, on everybody outside of me.
And providing and trying to prove that you were successful and trying to earn money and live up to also your dad's expectations.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, if you really want to go back to the root of it all, we could be here all day. But yes, certainly growing up with a father that did what he did and accomplished what he accomplished, and even just the basics of putting on a suit and tie and packing a briefcase and catching a train and working in a a high rise in Manhattan. All of those things were just visual cues of what I thought I should be doing. None of which, of course, played out, other than the occasional suit until ties and the rest of it flew out the window. But just, I wasn't being like my dad, which is what I thought I was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. So you get really emotional when you talk about looking at yourself in the mirror. And I want to hear you talk more about that, because I know that it's a bunch of things that come up for you, because you're not in that place that you were in, where you look in the mirror and see a failure. And you don't believe those things about yourself. And the challenge of simply standing in the mirror and looking in the eyes, I agree with you. That's the hardest part of adding this habit to your morning routine. Just put the toothbrush down and be with the person in the mirror. Look them in the eyes and don't see a reflection, see a human being who needs you. That half of men and women can't or won't look at themselves. And
it's a good point, because you can, it sounds weird, but you can look right through yourself in the mirror.
Yes.
Versus actually seeing yourself.
Yes. And if you aren't looking through yourself, a lot of us look at all the things we don't like. Mm-hmm. And so even gazing at ourselves is an act of self-criticism, because we're like, I hate my this, I hate my that, my, neck is saggy. And, you have since done a tremendous amount of therapy. You and I have done the psychedelic supervised therapies. You are in the middle of getting your master's in spiritual transpersonal psychology. You are getting your training to be a death doula and to sit with people at the end of their life. And you have also started a men's retreat called Soul Degree. And you've been leading retreats with men for 4 years, Chris. And there's a lot of emotion that comes up for you. 6 years, sorry, 6 years. Terrible wife. Can I get a high five? Cheer me on, even though. Thank you. Don't let go of my hand. I want to hold your hand. You have been in the presence of so many men. And you've even had Oakley reach out to you and had you counsel some of his friends through anxiety and through issues. And I know there's a lot of emotion there. So, can you just speak to the men and the boys that may be listening, or to the people in their lives that love them, about what you've witnessed, about, the kind of coaching that you lead, the meditation circles that you lead, not from what you want people to know about the importance of being able to look yourself in the mirror and learn how to take actions to truly support and love yourself, and that this is a very foreign concept for boys and men.
Yeah, I think that I mean, I often talk about Soul Degree as being a space that I hold for men that allows them to slow down. When the truth of the matter is, it's in the slowdown that all of those beautiful things can take place. And I think that the reason why there's a lot of emotion there for me, particularly with guys, is that, and I speak to all the partners and the spouses, the people that have sons and fathers and male counterparts, is that
Brothers.
Yes, it is the responsibility of the individual to be able to look in the mirror and see the whole person, foibles and all. But why there is a lot of emotion is because, in my experience in sitting with men, very rarely do men feel truly seen and heard. And that's not
on an emotional level. So let's go back to the mirror and what you experienced when, for 5 days in a row, you made it a habit to stop at a time in your life where you still were beating the shit out of yourself and look yourself in the eyes and either say, I love you, which I know is one of your practices, to look yourself in the eyes in the mirror and say, I love you. But, you know, to me, one of the powers of the high five habit is there's a lot of people that won't say, I love you. And so the physical action of giving the person in the mirror a high five demonstrates love. And so what did you experience for yourself personally in terms of the science working, the shift in how you started to see the person in the mirror?
Well, transformation doesn't happen without repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at one point, I don't remember if this is in the book, but the idea that there's so many mirrors out there in the world. I mean, you come across a mirror a dozen times a day, potentially.
Yeah.
And I tried that during the challenge. It wasn't just brush teeth in the morning one time. It was whenever I saw a mirror. And I think that's critically important, because this high five thing, this idea, it's not, I know you call it the high five habit, but it's one of those things that it almost feels elusive in terms of becoming habitual. And that's because next week or next year, some shit might go down,
right,
and you might do something, or something happens where you really feel immediately lousy about yourself. And so even though there may be some habit of you getting up saying, I love you, or high-fiving yourself, your life circumstance is going to get in the way.
Right.
Frequently.
Correct. Just like with exercise or drinking your water or getting a good night's sleep. But when you come back to that moment, because for me personally, it's a moment of joining in with myself. It's a moment of partnership with myself. And you used to coach almost all the, teams that our kids played on when they were little, when they're really little. And as a coach, like if you think about when you high five a kid, it's either to congratulate them for something that they did, or it's to help them shake something off and know that there's somebody that believes in them and to get back out there into the game. And for me, whether it's the high five I give myself in the morning after I brush my teeth and the moment I take to look at myself in the mirror, or like you said, I don't always high five myself throughout the day when I see a mirror, but I'll tell you something. I look at myself differently. And I know you do too. And so the importance of this because it is something that most of us don't do. I think we casually slip into the subconscious where we're beating ourselves up and we're on autopilot. And every time you pass a mirror, you have a chance to look yourself in the eyes and see a person that is worthy of celebrating, of cheering for, of believing in simply because you're here. That to me is the power of this. What is the power of it for you?
I'm still a little steeped in acknowledging that, yes, I'm here, but not like here physically and how great this is that I'm alive and breathing. Yes, that's all amazing. But when I look in the mirror, it's what I see is I guess I can see the age and the wisdom and the learning more. That I'm more grateful for that, for having been through what I've been through. And so the looking in the mirror and the acknowledging of myself, it's rarely like, okay, you got this, all right, your next meeting or your next whatever.
Maybe it should be.
Maybe, but like I said, I look forward less than I do look back.
Great.
And today in the look back, there's more gratitude and appreciation and a willingness to high five those elements of me, which for so many years I hated.
When you look in the mirror, can you describe the person you see today?
I see a man for who he is. And I see a man with different but the same number of battle scars that every other man, I think, has, in the sense of what I've been through, what's worked, what hasn't worked. I see a man who's worked his ass off, but not necessarily with the right mindset or for the right reasons. Like if there's regret, that's probably the area to dig in for me, is just being able to completely release that. Yeah, I made that choice for that reason at that time with the tools that I had,
right,
and that's all I knew. And so I see today, looking in the mirror, somebody that is accepting of those decisions and choices that I made, and even acknowledging the pain and the struggle that I was also blind to. I mean, the idea of sort of coming to terms with having battled depression, I think I was oblivious to that for many years just didn't even occur to me. That might have been part of the resistance too, if you're battling depression, a high five in the mirror definitely feels like the last thing in the world you would ever pursue.
But it's something that you should.
Oh, without a doubt. I see a man I love. I see a man I'm proud of. I see a great father. And I see a great partner to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a man who has accomplished a lot in a short period of time. I see a man who's doing his best and deserves a look in the eye and a high five.
All right. Well, I'll give you one. Oh my God.
I think one last thing I want to say to the men out there, any man who feels a sense of failure or that they haven't lived up to their own expectations or those outside of them, any man who's been battling with or has battled with addiction or depression or any of these things that drag us down, I strongly encourage you to start with you and to begin with forgiveness. Not always so easy, but without a doubt, I know from my experience, not just me personally, but being in the company of lots of men, that we are all working our ass off to do the right thing. And while we don't always believe that the results live up, it's in the forgiveness and the starting with yourself and the self-acknowledgement.
And I want to go back to what you said in the very beginning, because I know that we're going to get a ton of questions, Chris. Well, how? How do I begin that? One step that you could take today is trying this habit of even just looking yourself in the mirror.
I'm shocked that I'm even saying this, given my initial reaction to the high five habit. But I agree. Start right there. Start in the mirror.
Because if you change the story you're telling yourself about the person you see in the mirror, if you change the actions that you take in how you treat the human being in the mirror, if you change what you're thinking when you look in the eyes of the person in the mirror, that is the beginning of forgiving yourself. Like, you will never forgive yourself if you refuse to look yourself in the eyes with compassion and with forgiveness and with understanding. And one of the reasons why I'm going to keep hammering this, everybody, raise your hand and high five the mirror. Because if you're at a place where you are beating the shit out of yourself and you can't stand yourself for whatever reason, whatever you did, we've all done something, you don't have to change your thoughts. The neurobics and the science of simply making the physical gesture of the high five, Chris, and all of the lifetime of positive programming associated with it, it has a chemical, a neurological, a psychological benefit immediately that is grounded in science. And so the physical act does the work for you, and it starts to plow new neural pathways, and it releases dopamine, all of which will help you do the other work that you need to do to walk down the road of forgiving yourself. But if you got to start by simply looking at yourself in the eyes and seeing somebody who is worthy of forgiving, because you are.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. You could forgive yourself all day long walking down the sidewalk, but that's a futile exercise. The mirror is where it happens, and seeing yourself.
What happens from a mood benefit when you walk, and why does that happen?
Yeah, so I've a chapter in the book, I think, called "A Balm for Body and Brain." And one of the things that we know with an absolute high degree of certainty, as well as we know anything in science, is that walking boosts mood, and it does so in an enduring kind of way. So you can demonstrate this in all sorts of ways, but the simplest thing or simplest way of doing it to show the short-term boost to mood is by bringing people to the laboratory. And there's lots of studies have variations on this kind of study where you're ostensibly they're there to judge the beauty of the buildings that might be on a college campus or in a city center or something like that. And you have two simple conditions. One is they look at pictures on screens or pictures that have been printed out for them, or the other is they go for a walk and look at these buildings and they give ratings for each of these buildings. And before and after, you just get people to fill in a bunch of innocuous questionnaires, including one rating how they're feeling. And what you find consistently is that bringing people out for a short walk, a 10, 12, 15-minute walk, gives a short-term boost to how well they feel, even if they're people who hate walking. And there are such people. I find them somewhat mysterious myself, but there are people who dislike walking, but they still get a benefit from walking. And there are lots of other variations on these kinds of studies. There's some wonderful studies that have been conducted in Canada, where lots of towns have tunnels because of the severe winter conditions. And getting people to walk outside in so that they have a view of nature as opposed to walking in a tunnel, that gives a boost to how well you feel over and above the boost that you get from just going for a walk. So walking in nature is a very, very good thing for you. So those are kind of short-term boosts, but you can look at much better quality studies in terms of tracking people over time. And looking at the amount of movement that they engage in, and then asking the question, what is the likelihood that they're going to have depression or suffer from anxiety disorders or these kinds of conditions? And what you see, so I discuss in particular a very large-scale Australian study, is that people who are not moving or who move the least in the population are the ones who are most likely to succumb to major depressive disorder. So this is a tracking through time study. They're not depressed at the time that you're starting the study. You're tracking them over 7 or 8 years, and you're asking the question, how likely is it that they are going to have major depressive disorder? And the likelihood falls the more you move. Now, obviously, that tops out because at some point there are no more benefits. But the key point here is that if we design societies where people minimize their own physical activity, we're also designing societies where people are going to be prone to these, really unpleasant psychiatric disorders that can take, in some cases, years of therapy and work to remit. Whereas if we had designed our society in the first place so that people were moving more, this problem would not arise.
So if I go for a 10-minute walk, why does that boost my mood?
So there are lots of potential reasons. We don't know the deep reason is the honest truth. But what we can say is that depending on where you're walking, and this is also an important thing, if you're walking in nature, things like your stress hormones start to fall. You can engage in creative thinking, which you might not have been able to engage in if you're just sitting at home ruminating over something unpleasant. You can escape yourself for a while, which is also, I think, a good thing to be able to do. Sometimes we get annoyed at being in our own heads, and not being in our own heads, being mindless is, to my mind, actually a great benefit, so that you're not excessively focused on yourself. And walking in nature brings with it a particular benefit that I think people, again, kind of underestimate. When you're walking in a nice suburban environment where there's lots of trees, like where, for example, I'm lucky enough to live, that's actually an inherently interesting and pleasant experience, because humans enjoy a connection to nature. You get the benefit of your stress hormones, as I've said, falling. You get this chance to engage in creative ideation that you wouldn't otherwise be able to engage in. So those kinds of things happen pretty quickly, and they happen because we have bodies that are designed and brains that are designed to allow us to engage in movement. Now, I did say at the start, the environment matters. if you imagine walking along the edge of a freeway, or a motorway, as we would call it, where cars are whizzing past at unpredictable speeds of 70 miles an hour or whatever it happens to be, and you've also got loud noises and you've just got concrete around you, that will be a very stressful and unpleasant experience. And we've got lots and lots of data from which I don't discuss in this book, but which from a variety of sources, showing that people who are trapped in those kinds of urban environments are much more prone to psychiatric disorder than people who can escape from those. So this is why building accessible city parks, for example, is in my mind an unalloyed good. It's something that we should be doing.
So I agree with you. And I would still love to know, like, let's just say it's ideal settings. It's a beautiful day. We're going for a walk in a beautiful city park or in a suburban neighborhood or out on some trail. The birds are chirping, the sun is shining, and you're going to go for a walk for like just 10 minutes. You're going to take a brisk walk.
Yeah.
You said stress hormone. Does that mean that the cortisol drops? Does dopamine kick in? Like, what is happening in your body? Because
this is what I say to you. We have to be careful about what we can state with certainty. So
yeah,
just about every study that says dopamine, they don't measure dopamine because it's not possible to measure dopamine. We're not allowed, for good reason, to drill holes in people's heads and sample what level of dopamine is present. We can measure cortisol much more easily because you can take blood samples, we can take samples from saliva, and there are other ways of getting at it. So again, what we have are correlations. We can't do the kinds of studies that you might like to do that would be causal, but I think that the correlation is itself good enough. When you expose people to nature, and when people are walking under their own steam or moving under their own steam through nature, people report changes in well-being that are very positive, as opposed to, for example, when just being sedentary. So when you compare them to sedentary controls, and similarly, when you ask people to do slightly unpleasant things, like I said, to walk along the edge of a very busy road where there's the noises and all of those things are unpredictable and the environment is a little bit threatening. So it's a constellation of several things coming together at once. It's not just one thing.
That's pretty cool. What are those things? Because I guess what I'm trying to understand is this. I think it's common sense. We've all had the experience where we've gone for a walk and you immediately feel better. And going for a walk outside can solve like 90% of the problems that you have. It boosts your mood. It makes you feel a little bit more energized. I notice that it clears my head, but I don't know why. And I think when people understand the why, in terms of, even if it's just a correlation, they might become more motivated to get their ass off the couch and take that walk and make it part of their lives. And so that's just what I'm curious about, because I've felt all those things, but I've always wondered, well, what's actually happening that my mood gets boosted? And what I just heard you say is that, first of all, it's a correlation. They're not drilling holes in our heads and saying, oh, the dopamine spiked. But there's a clustering effect of being outside, of moving your body, of having your brain stimulated in a certain way that has a chemical benefit.
And experiencing movement. You've got optic flow, you've got lots of other things going on.
What is optic flow?
So this is the sensation of things moving on either side of you as you move. Imagine walking down a corridor. You can feel the walls receding behind you. So you get lots of activity occurring that wouldn't be there when you're sedentary. And I guess the key point.
Why does that matter? What does
because again,
flow do?
If I keep coming back to this key point, our bodies are built for movement. So when you're moving, you're being prepared for action. Lots of brain systems and body systems are ready to do things. They're not if you're just sitting down. So optic flow in and of itself is neither here nor there. but it generates the sensation of movement. It prepares the body. Well, you're actually moving, but you can do optic flow studies where you can simulate movement quite easily, and people hate that because you get this dizzy kind of feeling. You get this when you're on an escalator, for example, when you go to walk on an escalator that isn't moving. You've had that sway, I'm sure.
It's very destabilizing.
It's very destabilizing. But the key point that I keep coming back to is that movement itself is the good thing for you, because it entrains simultaneously lots of activity at lots of different levels of your body, from a variety of different changes in the brain, all the way down to the contact that your feet make with the substrate. And why does that feel good? Well, we can hand wave about this, but I think the simplest answer is this. Those of us in our ancestral past who didn't move got eaten. And those of us who enjoyed moving and actually got around and didn't hang around didn't get eaten. And evolution has given us these kind of positive feelings that come as an end consequence of doing things that are good for us, and it rewards us by making us feel good. Can I prove that? I think in evolutionary terms, it has to be true. Where you see in populations that don't move, they're subject to predation, they're subject to all sorts of things. But humans, again, uniquely, started this march, and we've profited from it. So you have this kind of positive feedback thing going on all the time, that we're kind of restless, and we kind of enjoy that restlessness when we test it by actually getting out there and moving.
So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions to see, because our team dug into your book and into your work, and we had a bunch of questions. One is, how does taking a walk improve your creativity?
Yeah, so the creative walking is kind of one of these things. I think we're damned with this one word, which for this activity that does so many things.
Wait, are you saying there's different types of walking?
Of course, the general idea here is that we've got one word for an activity, which is walking, but we walk for all sorts of different purposes. So my kind of key point that I want to get across is that we're cursed because we have this one word, which allows us, or which is a label for something that ends up being lots and lots of different things. So I've mentioned social walking already. You've mentioned it. We walk together. We've mentioned walking for health. So what do we call that? Health walking? I don't know. Healthy walking. I'm sure we could come up with a phrase. And then there's walking for creative ideation.
How do you do that?
Well, you do it by going and walking and thinking. It's that.
Well, let me ask you, because it doesn't sound that simple. So I'm in the middle of writing my next book.
Yeah.
And I'm at a bit of a let's just say I have hit a wall, and I've got writer's block. I can't figure out the order of the table of contents. How do you go for a walk to have the maximum benefit if you want to have kind of creative ideation?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways of approaching this. And I think, first of all, we have to think about what it is we mean by creativity and how the brain can be creative. And one of the things that's, I think, very clear is that constantly focusing on a problem that you're finding difficult to solve is the worst way to go about solving that problem. What you need is time away from the task as well as time on the task. And there are lots of ways of showing this. One very simple way is to give people complicated logic problems to solve, and just letting them read them, and then letting them have a night's sleep and getting them to solve them in the morning. And what you'll find is that people are very, very good at solving those problems in the morning, even though they haven't been ostensibly thinking about them during the course of their sleep. But of course, lots of things happen in sleep in terms of reorganization of knowledge and consolidation of memory and all of that kind of thing, which I think we're only really starting to kind of to appreciate. Now, where walking and creativity is concerned, there are lots of ways of demonstrating this. But I think the first thing to say is that walking and creativity have been recognized by philosophy and mathematicians and lots of other people for probably centuries as being intimately related. And psychology has only caught up on this in the last 10 or 20 years, which is we're really only at the early stages of trying to figure this one out. So in my own case, I dictated a lot of the book to get a first draft. And how did I do that? Well, what I would do is very simple. I would write down bullet points on a page and take a dictaphone with me, not a telephone, because that thing is just too distracting.
What happens when you have a phone on you or in your hand when you're walking? How does that rob you of some of the benefit?
I don't know that it robs you. What it does, I suppose, there's an ambiguous literature on this. People who are good at texting while walking tend to have very good peripheral vision, compared, and this seems to be trainable. So it's not necessarily the case that it's a bad thing. But if you have a problem that you're trying to solve, what you really need is to spend time with your own thoughts, not with a phone. So you shouldn't have the thing in your hand. And that's why, for example, when I dictate, I will never dictate into the phone, because I don't want to see alerts coming in. I don't want to have the temptation of checking emails or anything like that. And a key part of creative thinking is the preparation and incubation kind of stage. And then, so what do I mean by preparation? This is the kind of research stage. And then you just need to let the ideas percolate around, come together in a variety of different ways. So you can go for a walk where you just decide not to think of the problems that you're working on, that you're going to go out for 20 minutes or a half an hour and not think about them at all. The other thing you can do, and this is up to you as an individual, or your listeners as individuals, is to do the other thing, which is to walk and think loosely about the problem that you've got, not in very defined terms, but think in very kind of loose terms, so that what you're trying to do is discover associations and connections that weren't obvious to you when you were sitting there breaking your fingers on the keyboard and banging your head off your desk because you weren't able to solve the problem. So I think we're still at a sufficiently early stage in trying to understand the relationship between creativity and walking, that we don't have a definitive recipe. What we can say, though, is that if people undertake walks before they have to engage in problem solving, the numbers of creative ideas that they come up with go up substantially compared to people who've been sitting and not moving for the same period. So why is that? Well, go on. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I because what I read in your book is that it can increase creativity 2 times. Like it really boosts the creative flow in your brain. And then you were about to say, why is that?
Yeah. So there's a couple of potential reasons. So I think one of the major discoveries in neuroscience over the last kind of 20 or 25 years is this idea of default activity in the brain. And default activity is the kind of what we revert to when we're not watching telly and we're just not when we're instructed not to think of anything at all. What do we think about? We think about our social relations. We think about problems that are important to us. We're not engaged in focal thought. We're moving backwards and forwards on a mental timeline, what we did in the past, what we did yesterday, what we're planning to do tomorrow. And we're thinking about our social relations.
Mm-hmm.
And what we now know from the kind of brain imaging literature is that when people are engaged in creative problem solving, they're doing 2 things simultaneously. And this is something that you have to practice. It's not easy to do. You're kind of focused on this big picture, and at the same time, you're focused on the detail. This is a hard thing to do. So the metaphor I use in the book is you're trying to see the forest and the trees at the same time.
Okay.
Or you're flickering between these 2 states where you're zooming back from something and then you're focused in on the detail. And the wonderful thing about walking is I think it frees you for thinking that you wouldn't be able to engage in if you're just sitting there at your computer. because you're not trapped by this little small screen and what's in front of you, you've got a chance to cogitate on lots and lots of other things. And that's why, for example, when I walk, I just happen to notice on my desk here, I have a page of them. I've scribbled notes, and I take my dictaphone and I'll look at those, and I'll ignore people looking at me, and I will dictate from them. And you end up with thoughts and ideas that you wouldn't otherwise have had. And again, the key point is that you're not engaging in distracted walking, in the sense that you're walking around with this thing in your hand.
Right, you follow.
What you're doing is engaging in a kind of a mental zigzag between different ideas, until you find the one that makes you go, aha, that's the way I need to do it. And it might be a big idea, or it might be a small idea. You might have a small personal thing that you need to sort out, or it might be some big thing, like sorting out a table of contents for a book is a big deal. It's really annoying, and getting it right is really important, because otherwise the book itself will fail.
Well, I'm sitting here wondering if one of the reasons why walking helps you have more creative ideas is because it has this ability to suppress the default mode network, and that sort of chattering that is going on in the subconscious on default when you're sitting still and staring at a computer, that there's something about the brain moving your body, the feet on the ground, the optic flow of your eyes moving back and forth, and the sense of movement, and how all of that must quiet a part of your brain that you're not able to tap into when you're sedentary.
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea that I get to with this concept of mindlessness. That with mindfulness, you're paying attention to the flow of thoughts through your head. But when you're being mindless, you're not paying attention to anything in particular. And I think there's an important psychological distinction between those two things. One where you're actively attending to the flow of thoughts, and the other where you're getting out of your own head and freeing yourself from that flow of thoughts. And but I think there's also something else goes on, which is going on as well. At the moment, I'm seated. Now I'm not using the back of the chair, so I'm seated forward. So there's a little bit more strain on my body, which is a good thing for the purposes of this conversation. Why is that? Well, parts of my brain that would be quiet, quiescent, are active because they're there trying to maintain my balance. You can see I'm gesturing wildly when I'm talking to you as well. And the kind of idea that I have is that ideas that are just below the level of consciousness get tickled a bit because your brain is a bit more active, and they bubble up into consciousness, and then you can consider them. Whereas if you're hunched back and there's not a lot going on, you end up somewhat blank, and there's nothing coming to mind.
Well, I love that visual, because what I just got when you use the word tickle is that when you're outside and you're in nature and you're moving your body and you've got that state of optic flow happening, I kind of picture almost like the energy of your body is creating like the effect of turning the knob on a stove. And so things start to bubble in your mind due to the energy and the activity in your body.
Yeah.
How short of a walk makes a difference? Like if somebody were to simply just start doing a 10-minute walk every day outside in a wooded area or a quiet area without their headphones on, over time, would that make a big difference? Would they likely feel a boost in their mood? Because, I'm sitting here thinking a lot of people are too sedentary because they think it's going to take 30 minutes, or they think it's going to take an hour. They think it's going to be hard.
So there's good news and bad news here.
Okay.
So the good news is that you don't have to do a half hour. You don't have to do 40 minutes in one burst. In fact, the good news is that lots of small bursts distributed right throughout the day is actually probably the best thing for you. That if you look at humans that live in non-mechanized groups, they're not engaging in a sudden burst of activity and then doing nothing. What they're engaging in is lots of low level activity distributed right throughout the day with rest periods. So the advice to get up and walk for 2 minutes every half hour or whatever is really good advice, rather than sitting at your computer for that time.
You
Now,
can get a benefit from a
even
2-minute
from
walk.
even from a little bit of activity, you don't need to do a lot, but you do need to do some. Now, here's the bad news. Most humans in Western societies are not moving at all, are not moving very much. So we know this from mobile phone, smartphone data, of which you can grab the levels of activity that people engage in. And what you see in Western societies, Ireland, the US, the UK, France, and all the rest of them, is sadly that people don't walk very much. The average adult in the US, for example, walks at about 4,000 steps a day. Now, a child learning to walk does about 1,200 steps per hour.
Whoa.
So there's a huge difference. And the country that walks the most is Japan. Why? Because they have cities that are car hostile, despite them being one of the major car producers on the planet. Because it's a very small country and there's lots of people, they walk an awful lot. As I said, most people don't walk very much. So my advice is always walk about 5,000 steps per day more than you're doing. And that gets you, for most people, very close to that magic 10,000 steps, which is...
Where did that come from?
It's
Where
a made up...
10...
No, it's made up. There are all sorts of apocryphal tales about where it came from. One is...
Which one is your favorite?
I think the one that I like the best is that it's a mistranslation from a Japanese activity company in the 60s. I don't know if it's true or not. However, what we do know is that if you look at what's called all-cause mortality, your likelihood of dying of anything rises the more inactive that you are, and it falls the more active you are. So at somewhere between about 4,500 and 7,500 steps per day, people's all-cause mortality falls quite substantially, something like 30 or 40%. You must turn on your mobile phone and find out how many steps you're walking per day, because most people don't know.
Okay.
So that's the first thing you need to do.
Okay.
And what you'll find for most people most of the time is that they're not walking very much at all. It's probably around 3,000 or 4,000 steps a day. And that increases your chances of dying younger of something unpleasant.
I got 2,800 steps right now.
So, yeah. So you need to add 5,000 steps to that.
Okay. How big of a distance is that?
I guess it's about 5 kilometers or 4.5 kilometers.
That's a lot. So I have to walk 2 miles a day, 2.5 miles a day, you're saying?
Yeah, to my mind, it's not much at all. But I can boast because I did 9,785 steps today. And
Shane with the flex, everybody. He's holding up his phone. Well, you are the walking guy. I would hope you walk every day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you got to track. You got to do 5,000 more. Okay.
Nobody knows how many steps they took last Tuesday week. Do you? Do I? No, of course I don't.
Well, you should, because you're telling us to track.
No, of course not. I don't have a brain that's designed to remember the number of steps that I take every day. That's why we offload this to a pocket computer. And what again? Just to look at what we know about people in non-mechanized societies, because we can learn lots from them. So there are tribal societies in Africa, the Hadza, for example, who live traditional lifestyles, and they walk a lot. They walk everywhere. And these people don't have metabolic diseases on average. They don't have diabetes. They don't have lots of body fat. They tend to have very, very healthy hearts. And what you see is they're walking somewhere in the range, depending on whether they're male or female, between 10 and 20,000 steps per day on average. So the benefits are there in terms of health, in terms of heart health and all of the other things. But you actually got to put in the miles, unfortunately. And this is why I say, doing lots, doing a little often is really the key, rather than trying to get one single burst of activity in and hope that that'll zero out all the bad things that you've been doing during the day. Um, and this is why I don't want to blame individuals for lack of movement. Our environment around us determines to a very large extent whether or not we can walk or not. So as I've said, I live in a very pleasant part of Dublin. We've good footpaths, we have local parks, and all the rest of it. So it's easy for me, and I can take the train to work without any trouble. But if I was living in some of the more difficult parts of the city, there mightn't be adequate footpaths, the infrastructure mightn't support it, there mightn't be adequate lighting at night. People might be afraid because of maybe crime or something else. There are lots of things that go on. Or, as I said, where my building is concerned, it's designed so that you have to take the elevator.
Yeah.
So the kind of policy decisions bake in the kind of environment around us, and that in turn determines what it is that we're able to do. So if you have very good public transport, if you've got very nice wide sidewalks, if you've got lots of green around you, and everything's accessible on foot more easily than it is in a car, well, then people will walk. They will just default to that without thinking about it. But if the reverse is true, well, then you can't blame people for getting in their car. That's just the way.
That's true. But I think you would agree that even if somebody lives in an area where the only good footpaths or sidewalks are the ones on the block they live in, still getting outside and taking a walk around your block several times a day still has a really positive impact on your life.
All other things being equal, yes. As I keep saying, movement is good for you, and
Yes.
getting out is good for you. But if the conditions are hazardous, if you're an old person and it's winter and there's lots of ice,
Yeah.
well, then you're going to be trapped. So again, it comes down to how the environment around us is built as well. It's not just on the individual. If you can make it the default so that people walk as their first choice, well, then life is very different. And this is why you see, for example, you take a city like New York. It's the city that people walk the most in the
It's
US.
true. Yeah.
And there are lots of other cities where people don't walk as much because they're designed very, very differently.
It's true. It's absolutely true. If you had to say, because a lot of what we've talked about is how being sedentary impacts you negatively, therefore movement is medicine and any movement is better than no movement. But if you had to frame it in the positive, what are the benefits of having a daily walking practice where you are getting outside and you are taking a walk outside every day? What are all the benefits to doing it?
Well, there are lots, and the obvious one is to start with is how you feel. You will feel better slowly over the days. If you've been sedentary and you haven't been moving before, you're going to find it a bit of a struggle, perhaps at first when you get walking, but you will, over the course of a few days, you will discover actually you feel pretty good, and you miss it when you stop walking, and you will adapt very, very quickly. And the example that I give is we can adapt easily to walking 20 or 25 miles a day if we have to. It only takes a week or two to do that. But we won't adapt that quickly to running 20 or 25 miles a day, the equivalent of a marathon a day. We can walk the equivalent of a marathon a day, day in, day out, without too much trouble. But we can't run the equivalent of a marathon day in, day out, because our bodies are designed for walking and walking together with others, carrying children, carrying food, and we can break a walk up into a couple of maybe phases of 3 or 4 miles in the morning, another 3 or 4 miles in the early afternoon, another 3 or 4 miles in the evening, or whatever it happens to be. So we adapt very quickly, and our mood adapts positively because of that. I think you'll also find, in terms of cognition, a kind of a general benefit, which is that you will feel a clarity of thinking that you might find eludes you otherwise. I think you'll find social benefits, that walking with others, or walking and happening to meet others, because, randomly intersecting with your neighbors, or those familiar strangers, turns out to be a very good thing for you as well. So you've got all of those kinds of benefits. So those are all kind of, quote, head-centered ones. But then there are lots of others for the other organ systems of the body. We know, for example, that things like metabolic disorders, things like type 2 diabetes, or heart conditions, and those kinds of conditions tend to drop off dramatically in people who are active compared to people who are inactive. So there's a kind of a positive feedback where that's concerned. Simple things like if you have a bad back because you're seated all day, rather than taking some pills to try and damp the inflammation down, go for a walk and generate some natural anti-inflammatories, which will or act against the inflammation and loosen your back out, and you'll feel an awful lot better from that point of view as well. So, there's a whole constellation of things that happen to be under this one word, which is why I say we're damned by this word, because we've only got one word which covers all of these other things.
Are there times when you should walk fast versus walking slow? And what's the difference in terms of the benefits?
I guess I guess again, it depends on your intention where the walk is concerned. If you're walking to enhance heart health, walking fast and walking at a pace where it's difficult to talk to another person is a really good way of doing that. That's better than jogging slowly. You're going to be placing more demands on your cardiac system than and your circulatory system than you would have been otherwise. So it really depends. I'm inclined to the view, and this is just based on personal experience, that if you're trying to think through a difficult problem, if you're trying to engage in creative ideation, that it's hard to do that when you're walking very fast. That walking at a slightly lower speed is probably the way to go. And then if you're walking with kids, well, then you're going to be walking at the rate that they're walking at. So I guess it really depends on the purpose of your walk. If you're walking, I think, to boost your overall physical health, walking at a good clip is what you really need to do. But if you're walking to think something through, probably walking a bit more slowly is probably the thing to do. And there's a way to demonstrate that. Imagine, for example, I ask you to engage in a complex addition problem.
Okay.
Add 17s until you get to 999.
Oh my God. I used to like you, Shane.
That's hard. Or take 17s away from 1,000. You can do that when you're walking slowly. You can do it sitting. But if you're walking fast, you'll find your ability to do it drops to zero.
I'm sitting here so I'm sitting here going, what is 1,000 minus 17 right now? 983, 987. No, that's not it. 987, isn't that it? Well, it's not 983.
No. 883. No? It's 800 and sorry, 983.
You don't have it either.
You're putting me off. It's 983. Anyway, my point is that we can see it here, when we're doing something that imposes a mild mental strain while we're talking to another person under slightly unnatural circumstances. Our ability to do a simple arithmetical problem drops dramatically as well. So my point really is that if you're thinking about something, probably walking a little bit more slowly is fine. But if you're walking for physiological health, walking more quickly is the thing to do. It depends on the purpose of the walk.
You know what? You're delightful. And if I ever come to Dublin, I hope you'll take a walk with me.
Of course.
You can even bring your dictator and do your little dictating as we walk. I'll let you do that.
Thank you. You're very good.
Oh, you're great. You're really great. I learned a lot. And I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Where do we all begin?
Yeah. The thing is, first understand that food creates mood.
Food creates mood.
So we're always trying to find out ways to make ourselves happier,
Right.
think more clearly, be more satisfied, right?
Mhm.
And so that's why I got so interested in this work, because with my background in nutrition and being a doctor, I thought, well, if we can control our mood through food and the actions that we take on a daily basis, why aren't we talking about this? Why isn't this first line therapy? There's really good research, a new study from South Australia, that the combination of diet and exercise
Yep.
was 1.5 times more effective for depression than the leading medications.
Now explain why. Because that's a big research result that just through food and exercise,
Yeah.
it was found to be 1.5 times more effective than medication alone.
And if you think about it, they actually even put therapy and medications, kind of the traditional treatment, into
Yeah.
one category.
Okay.
And they compared that with changing your diet, with changing your sleep, your exercise, lifestyle habits.
Okay.
And they said, we should be prescribing this as first-line therapy for depression. There's multiple anxiety studies, ADHD. I mean, we are missing the boat. Obviously, we're not doing something right, because depression is skyrocketing. So is anxiety. So is obesity. So is diabetes. So is cardiovascular disease. So the status quo is not working. So why not employ these techniques and put them at the forefront? So things like we talked about already and that are in the book are teaching you that we have control, that yes, do all the things, but also change the way you eat, change the way you exercise, get more sunlight.
Well, you might be depressed and anxious and struggling with a lot of stuff because of what you're eating
Yes.
and because of your lifestyle right now. And so I think it's really great news to hear that you can feel better if you start to eat better. And that this whole cycle that you are trapped in terms of the cravings that never end and the cycle of emotional eating and feeling lethargic and feeling anxious, that you can, based on the research and based on the work that you do with patients around the world, that when you take your food intake seriously, you can profoundly change your mood, you can change your body, you can change your lifestyle, all of it. But it begins with the food. How do you know if you're getting enough sleep based on the things that you study?
Yes.
Because you hear 8 hours.
Yeah. How many hours do you sleep, by the way?
The older I get, the more boring I am. So I would say 9 or 10.
Yeah, I love that. People who sleep less than 6 hours have higher mortality. They have lower mood, and they are hungrier, as we said, with the leptin.
Huh.
What you want to do is really to realize how much sleep you need is when you sleep without an alarm. How many hours do you sleep? And not when you're sleep deprived, but
Oh, I bet I sleep 10 hours.
yeah,
If I don't have an alarm on, I sleep way longer than I think I'm going to.
when you look at the last couple of weeks of your life,
Yes.
the best days, when you felt the most refreshed, the best mood,
Or were the days I got the highest amount of sleep.
that's
By
how
far.
much, that's how much sleep you need. And every American that's listening to this is going to be like, I can't sleep that much. But you think about your best days of your life happened when you slept adequately. It changes your hunger hormones. It changes your hormones in general, for women, especially as we get older. This is important. It changes your mood. It changes your ability to make decisions
Yeah.
and your interactions with other people. So why would you want to skimp on that? Why would you say that you'll be like everybody else, sleep when you're dead? when you look at the data says opposite. It says if you don't sleep, you'll be dead much earlier.
That's true.
If you don't sleep, you will be more depressed, more anxious, have more hunger and craving signals. You are going to be a version of yourself that is a shell of what you want to be.
So one final thing that I think would be extremely helpful to people. Let's assume that we went to bed early and we wake up and we get a good night's sleep. Can you walk us through what you would recommend the eating routine, or what is on our plate and when are we actually eating?
Okay.
For like, complete hormone balance.
Yes. Okay. So as you know, everybody is different and
Yep.
their life circumstances are different. Every time I do this, people say, oh, but I work night shift or
Right.
I have little kids. I get it. Like I had many years where I didn't get enough sleep, where I didn't get enough sunlight, where I couldn't make the best decisions because I was just so pulled in, all the different directions.
Uh-huh.
So I get it. But we didn't even talk about circadian rhythms, but Mel, sunlight and darkness run our bodies. We have internal clocks in every one of our cells. So routines are excessively important
Okay.
in terms of our mood and our body, our nutrition. So when you wake up in the morning, you want to get sunlight. I have a rule that I learned from someone online. Basically, I did this for a few days and I felt the best I've ever felt. And I'll tell you what it is. When you wake up, instead of scrolling your phone,
Yep.
checking your messages and your emails, go get sunlight first. Sky before screens.
Ooh, I love that.
So sky before screens is how you should start your day. Your body is wired to see sunlight in the morning. Even if it's a cloudy day, it just has to be bright light.
Okay.
You can just walk outside. For me, it's my back door. Just walk out for a few minutes. It could be 2 to 10 minutes. You could do, for me, I'm usually just in my pajamas. So I'm coming back in and getting ready for the day.
Okay.
So you don't want to have food or caffeine in the first 45 minutes of your day.
Why?
I'll tell you why. When you wake up, you feel groggy, right?
Yep.
That grogginess is mostly from adenosine in your brain.
Adenosine. Okay.
And it clears out, as you know, within 30, 40 minutes, it clears out. Then you have your coffee. Then you eat your food. And the reason why is coffee, the way it works, it blocks our adenosine receptor. So that means that it doesn't help get rid of the adenosine. It just blocks it from actually binding.
Okay.
So if you don't let the adenosine clear out and you just drink your coffee, when the coffee wears off in a couple of hours, that adenosine's still there. And it just binds those receptors and you feel excessively tired.
And that's why you think you need another cup of coffee.
And then you're fully dependent, like the people that wake up and they need the coffee right then, and then they need it again at like 10 o'clock, and then they need it again at 1 o'clock. It's because you're not letting that adenosine
Whoa.
go.
Okay.
You need to let that clear out.
I'm guilty of this. So
Yes.
I am going to try this tomorrow. I am going to absolutely have my coffee and then, oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to wait 45 minutes. Then I'm going to have my coffee. I'm going to see if I have a craving for a second cup.
Yes.
That is fascinating. Okay.
So you want to let it clear out naturally because it's not going to clear out naturally if you start the caffeine cycle right away.
Got
okay?
it. So clear it out for 45 minutes. Get our sun in. What's next?
Eat.
Okay.
So
No intermittent fasting.
I love intermittent fasting
Then why are we eating?
because I do it the opposite way.
Talk to me.
There's very good evidence that for thousands of years, we ate in one scheduled way,
Okay.
which is daylight hours.
Oh.
There was no microwaves, Uber Eats, they had a fire and you'd maybe eat an hour or two after sundown. That's it, right?
Yep.
You are not snacking at midnight. There's nowhere to store the food thousands of years ago. Our internal clocks are set so that when melatonin hits 2 to 3 hours before bed, your organs shut down.
Mm.
You cannot process sugar as well as you did. You can't take it into your muscles. You are not you're not releasing digestive enzymes. So basically, when you're eating late at night, you're waking your body up in the middle of the night and asking it to do a math problem. Your body is going to be like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to make mistakes.
Yep.
You wake up and you're tired and you're pissed that someone woke you up in the middle of the night. That's what happens when you eat late at night.
Holy smokes. You put your body in conflict with itself.
Yeah, and so intermittent fasting, everyone's doing it the wrong way. They're eating way late into the night, and then they don't eat all day when the sun is out, right? Like that's the time that your body's ready for food, right? So ideally, you wait an hour because nobody needs to be eating every minute of every day.
Yep.
Americans we just eat 14 to 16 hours a day. It's just too much, right? So you wake up, maybe you get some movement in, you get your sunlight, you eat about an hour or two even after you wake up. You don't
Okay.
need to push it to 2, 3, 4 o'clock. Like people are doing this thing. There's good evidence that skipping meals is actually bad for you and that people who do it habitually actually have worse health outcomes, okay?
Got it.
So eat your breakfast. You want to have a high dopamine breakfast.
Yep.
Let's have, cottage cheese, eggs, tofu scramble, veggies, nuts, berries. Okay.
Great. When do I eat next?
Then you
Because I'm already hungry. Well, no. Am I hungry right now?
Yeah.
Would I eat vegetables? I would eat vegetables
There
right
you
now.
go.
So
Then
that
you're
must
hungry.
mean I'm hungry. But I got to have a glass of water first, and then I'm going to ask myself that again.
Yes. So
See, I'm learning.
then you tune in with the inner Mel, the
Yep.
brain gut Mel.
Yep. Okay.
So then you can eat when you're hungry. Again, you can use your inner cues. It could be 12, could be 1, whenever your inner cues.
Okay.
You'll notice your ghrelin is set to on a timer. Every day you'll get hungry at the same time.
So hello, ghrelin.
Yeah.
It just dumped on. It just I think dumped on me.
Yeah.
So what do you eat for lunch?
So basically, lunch is a chance for you to get the healthier you eat earlier in the day, the better your chance of sticking to it. So
Okay.
they always say exercise and eating healthier foods, breakfast and lunch is your best chance. So for me,
Okay.
I automated, and I had already talked to you when we had talked before that I try to eat the same things every day.
So what do you eat for lunch?
So I eat a salad for lunch. I usually put a protein source on it. It could be different beans, nuts, it could tofu, you could do eggs, you could do salmon, whatever you want. Protein and veggies. A salad with protein on it. And I always have a fermented probiotic food with my lunch because that's the best time for you to get in at least 1 to 2 servings of the kimchi, of the sauerkraut. It could be kombucha for a drink, apple cider vinegar in your dressing.
Yep.
So that's when you have the best chance. Really simple. It
Okay.
can be very simple. And then your dinner is when you want to eat. If you are
Serotonin,
someone,
baby.
yes, you're learning.
I'm paying attention.
So if I know it's not sexy to say eat carbs, but carbs actually can be very healthy for you, especially in vegetable form, sweet potato, quinoa, whatever it is. You can eat that later in the day if you want to have that big boost of serotonin.
And what about snacks? If I'm like legit hungry, but I'm not really craving anything,
Yes.
but I'm legit hungry midday, what's your go-to snack?
So remember that protein has this effect on your body that it tells your hunger hormones to stop. So if you want more leptin, eat more protein. So your snack can be yogurt. Your snack can be a protein shake. Your snack can be a piece of cheese. It can, something with protein because that will keep your dopamine levels up.
Okay.
And it will keep your hunger hormones stable. So protein snack, I think women especially, we're eating just too little protein. There is a theory
Yes.
that the reason we get fat from eating ultra-processed food is because it's so low in protein that your brain never gets the signal that you're full. Your protein threshold is never met.
Wow. One final thing I want to ask you because we didn't really cover it, gluten. Everybody I know is gluten-free.
Yeah. It's not the gluten. There's very few people who are actually allergic to gluten. It is very common to have GI issues with processed gluten. So when you eat a lot of bread, pizza, carbs, but that's not the gluten itself. It's the fact that you're eating processed food. So gluten gets mislabeled all the time. What I say to people is go gluten-free for a few weeks, 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
See how you feel. When you add the gluten back, don't add back the bread, the cookies, the cakes, and the processed gluten. Add back a small wheat bulgur, like in a salad.
Okay.
Add back a healthy sourdough bread.
Okay.
Add back, wheat in small unprocessed amounts, and then see how you feel. And what I realize is that people villainize gluten all the time. And in America, gluten-free has become such a tagline that those foods are more unhealthy.
Oh, because of all the processing. Look at you, Dr. Amy. Is there anything else on this topic that we did not get?
I think we covered so much. I think, like you said, and I have taken this to heart, is that there's no pill that's going to save you. There's no person that's going to save you. When you learn about all this, when you actually listen to your own self, you're going to be the one who saves yourself.
So let's get started. Why don't you just go ahead and tell me what is the challenge that you're facing and how can I help you?
Oh, okay. I am stuck.
Okay.
Like, I feel like I am in quicksand, and every time I try to move, I sink. And I've been on the personal growth, the development for years. I've read like all these self-help books, I've done programs, but I still feel like I'm 44 now, and I feel like life has passed me by. I feel like I'm in a job pays bills. It's not fulfilling. I thought that I'd be in a, relationship, have a husband, have kids by now, but don't. I, the, the relationship with myself is not where I'd like it to be. And I also uh, I'm in the worst shape that I've ever been in my life. And I look at myself in the mirror and I'm just like, okay, those 30 pounds, where did they come from? Oh, yeah, that's right. You made all these choices of eating bad food, right? And so I just feel like I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I don't know. Well, I do know where to start, but at the same time, I don't. I feel like I don't know where to start. So I just feel like, yeah, I don't know where to go from here because I read all the books, because I've done all of that stuff. I'm just like, but I'm still here.
Okay. Thank you for sharing all of that. And what I got is that you're in a job that's not fulfilling, but it pays the bills. That you're in the worst shape of your life and you have put on an extra 30 pounds. That you are not where you thought you would be in your personal life because at the age of 44, you thought you'd be married and have 4 kids. And your relationship with yourself is also in the gutter. And on top of all of this, you have been somebody that has read all these self-help books. You are interested in personal development, and yet you still feel very stuck. Did I get it? Is there anything else?
You got it in a nutshell, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you want to hear the good news or the bad news?
Let's go for the bad news.
Okay. So the bad news is that you are going to have to push through the emotion and the resignation that has built up. That's the bad news. That your own story, that you are not where you should be, that you made all these bad choices, that none of the stuff that you do is actually going to result in the big changes that you want. The bad news is your own attitude and story and emotions are going to be the biggest obstacle in your way. Do you want to know the good news?
Yes. Let's get some good news on there.
Well, what happened? I saw your face kind of go like, oh,
Yeah.
when I said the bad news. So what was your reaction to the bad news?
Shoot. Like, it's like, I got to do this. It feels overwhelming. It feels like this is some work, some real work that I have to do. And it feels like daunting.
Why does it feel daunting?
So I feel like I have so much work to do. I feel like there's just this insurmountable mountain that is just unattainable. But then there's another part of me that's like, no, it's not. Like, you can do this. You've got this. But there's that part of me that's just like, Ricky, it's not going to happen for you.
And are you experiencing the life that you want to be living right now?
No. There's moments. There's moments, yeah. But the overall, no.
Okay.
No.
See, the thing is that the reason why the mountain feels insurmountable is because you've convinced yourself that it's too late. That's the only reason why it feels insurmountable. The work is the work. And the work that will change your life and get you in shape and help you find a fulfilling career and get your life force back and have you have a wonderful relationship with yourself. And when that happens, the right person walks in. The work you need to do is the same work everybody needs to do to have those things. It's the story that you're telling yourself that you're already fucked up and that it's too late and that it's going to require too much and it's not going to happen. That's the only reason why you haven't gotten started. If I could tell you that the best years of your life were ahead of you, would you do the work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
The best years of your life, Ricky, are ahead of you.
You know what? There's a voice in my head right now. And that voice says, this is BS. And the best years of your life were before. Like when you were 22, when you were in your 20s. That's what there's this recording back there that's saying that. And it's so frustrating. It's extremely frustrating because I want to believe it. I want to believe you when you tell me that my best years are ahead of me. And I have friends who tell me that the best years are ahead of me. It's like, why can't I believe that? Why can't I take what you're saying and actually truly hang on and believe it 100%? Because that's really what I want.
There's a number of
reasons. Because I got to believe
why.
it to achieve it, right?
Yeah. There's a number of reasons why. Number one, you've been telling yourself the other story for so long that it's not going to happen. That's become your belief. Number two, because that's been your story, that it's not going to happen, and you're sad about that, your actions in your day-to-day life, your routines, your rituals, your habits, they now match that story. And so you have started to align with a person who believes that the best days of her life are behind you, which is why you're not taking care of your health. It's why having a job that is slowly sucking your soul dry but paying the bills is enough. It's why you've kind of given up or lowered your standards when it comes to the kind of person that you want to attract. Your actions keep you stuck because your actions are the kind of actions that somebody who doesn't believe that the best days of their life are ahead of them are taking. And so the solution is to figure out what the day-to-day life looks like of a woman who believes that the best days of her life are ahead of her. And by God, she's going to act that way. And I also have a suspicion. I have a suspicion that something happened to you, either in your late 20s or in your 30s, that knocked you on your ass and knocked you off track, and you haven't recovered from it. Because it strikes me that you say, my 20s were the best time of my life. And so tell me about what was going on in your 20s that made you feel like it was the best time of your life. And then I want to know what the hell happened that changed it.
I feel like in my 20s, I was more confident. I was doing the things that I liked. What really happened? My dad died.
Okay. How old were you?
He died when I was 28. Yeah. And after that, there was some depression that happened and, you know, some significant breakups that happened. And I feel like those were just like probably things that kind of crushed me.
Exactly.
And I just didn't really recover.
There you go. That's what happened. You experienced profound loss. And the loss of your father, followed by the breakup of a significant relationship, spun you around. And you have an opportunity to figure out, what does it look like for you in your life now to create that foundation that got ripped out from underneath you when you were in your late 20s. If I had to describe it, I would say that you went through a great loss and you have spent a decade grieving. And whether you realized it or not, and that in the past couple years, you've spent these past couple years kind of waking up from that and being disappointed with where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. It's okay. And one of the reasons why it's so easy, Ricky, to find yourself in a situation where you've read all the books, you listen to the podcast, but you do nothing, is because I think you're stuck also in a kind of freeze trauma response in your body where things kind of stopped moving forward when your dad died. And you went into kind of this mode. I kind of had this vision of you, almost like hunkered down, waiting for the next thing to happen. So like you go into this mode of not dreaming, not going for it like you used to in your 20s, but narrowing your focus to just getting through the day. And when you read all the books, you gain knowledge, right? That stays right up here. But what you're dealing with is you're dealing with something that happened to you in your heart and your soul. Is any of this landing for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the strangest thing is that I've never really put that together. Like I never really connected that. Um, like I didn't really feel like I've been grieving over for 10 years. I felt like when people ask me like when I think about my dad passing away, I feel like I've grieved and I feel like I've moved forward and I feel like I'm okay with it. I didn't really connect my being stuck in my life to that.
So I think in some ways you gave up on your own dreams. And then the breakup happened. And maybe were you with somebody that you thought you were going to marry?
I did. And it's weird because it's not just one relationship. It was like every relationship that I kind of got into afterwards, it was just like, I don't know. I can't even really explain it. But in my mind, I believed that more would come of it.
Mm.
And I'm embarrassed even like talking about this right now.
Why?
Um, why? Um, because you don't want to be that person that thought there was more and then there really wasn't. And I feel like that's what I have been. And yeah, that's why and it hurts. um, yeah.
So I can see why that would hurt. And I want you to consider looking at those relationships through a different lens, because we're going to start working on the story that you're telling yourself. Because part of the relationship story is I'm a failure, I fall for people, and I think that it's going somewhere, and they don't want me the way that I want them. I'm a failure. And I have a hunch, and again, we just met, but I have a hunch that if you were to look back on those string of relationships that didn't work after your father died, you were coping with your grief. You were not showing up healed, whole, confident you. You were showing up in those relationships with a hole that grief had created. And so when you get into a relationship and you get attached to somebody because they are filling a need that you have that you can't do in your own life, that's when things get out of balance. And because you were grieving, and I get the sense from you, because you strike me a little bit like me, that you thought you were fine, so we're going to move on, and we're going to keep working, and we're going to go forward with life, and now I'm going to meet this person, and everything's okay, because I don't want to scratch on that deeper thing that's really painful, because I'm okay, and I'm going to be tough. And yet, you carry all that stuff with you. And I think that's what happened in your relationships. That you were so wanting to be, basically to disappear in a relationship and to feel safe again, that you fall very quickly and then you misread the room. And that's it. That's all that happened, again, because of the grief. And this is all very normal. And when you start to see that things aren't lining up the way that you expected, you start to feel bad about yourself and you start to wonder, what's wrong with me? And there's nothing wrong with you. Nothing. And what you get to do now, Ricky, is we get to say today is day one of you reclaiming your happiness and taking your life back and healing what needs to be healed and defining for you what does a really fun and exciting life look like. And so I want to walk you through a super simple exercise, okay?
Okay.
I can see you processing. What emotions are coming up for you?
I don't want to cry.
Why?
Because I feel like if I cry right now, it'll be really ugly.
Great.
And it'll just be really sobby and
Great. What are the tears about?
letting go.
Mm-hmm.
I I am so used to, this might sound really crazy, but so used to feeling a certain way that imagining feeling differently feels almost uncomfortable.
What is the way that you're used to feeling? Let it come up.
That is not, doesn't matter how much how much good comes into my life, like it will never be how I want it to be. Like I will never get to where all the things that I desire, they'll actually never, it'll come so close, but not for me. It happens to everyone else around me, but it won't happen for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely won't, if that's your belief. Because you won't let it in.
Yeah.
And is this the way you want to experience life?
No, no, no.
And what would you have to change about the way that you live your life or the story that you tell yourself in order to have a different experience?
I would have to change that story. I would have to change that belief. I would have to
Yeah.
do things differently.
Yes. You'd have to cry. And the tears are super important because on the topic of your dad, all the tears that you cry over somebody that has died, it's just the love that you didn't get to express while they were here. So it's a way to let love into your life. All the tears that you need to cry over disappointment that you're letting go, that's the baggage and the shame and the kind of beating yourself up that you've been doing for years. That's like a backpack that you drag around. It's a way to release that. You focus so much on holding it together and being strong and moving forward. And then at the same time, like mounting all this evidence for how things are not working, that you're not letting love and joy and connection in. You're protecting yourself from it and you're building a case against it. So many people do this. I did this for so many years too. And, I want you to think about something. Maybe this will help.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can tell you what to do, Ricky. I can literally, and I will. I'll give you the domino that you need to tip first that will trigger a ton of other change. And if you just start chipping away at it, we can change absolutely everything. You can lose weight. You can start feeling like you're in your 20s again. You can change your job. You can get support and heal and really do the work to complete and feel present with your dad. You can forgive yourself for whatever you're doing, or you can forgive yourself for how you spent the last 14 years. You can do all that.
Mhm.
The doing is the easy part. But I want you to have a deeper experience in what you're saying to yourself. And you won't believe it in the beginning. But we got to figure out what you want to believe. And then we're going to list a series of rituals that you're going to do every day that are the actions that a person that believes that their life is amazing, that the best days of their life are ahead, that they deserve to be healthy and happy and vibrant and alive and in love. We got to start aligning your day-to-day actions with the belief that you want to be driving your life. And so that part's easy. It really is, because it's just, here's the shit you need to do. Fucking do it. That's it. Like that's change. But there's a deeper breakthrough for you. And I would classify it as letting love in. And I have this visual that I use in my mind because I didn't realize how much I blocked love.
Mhm.
I like to think about like your heart and your life as having a door, right? That separates you from the rest of the world. And for many, many years, the door between me and my heart and soul and the rest of the world was this like freaking mid-century steel thing that you would see on a castle that is impenetrable, right? Because I didn't trust people. I didn't love myself. I didn't feel like I was worthy. I saw all kinds of reasons why I'd fucked things up, why I was a bad person. And as I've done more and more work to be kinder to myself, to change the story about what I want to experience in life, I've started to convert that door. I did a renovation project. I got rid of that door and I put the kind of doors that you see into a kitchen in a restaurant, you know, that's got the tooth and they swing back and
Yeah.
forth, because it allows me to be more present to when I'm letting love flow to other people. And more importantly, when I allow the love to flow back to me. Does that resonate at all with you?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I'll tell you why it doesn't, and maybe you can help me with it because maybe
Okay,
it
great.
does, and I'm not seeing it. So I am, and my heart is completely just open for everybody and anyone.
Okay.
Like, and when I say that, I'm just like, I'm that friend that's always there. I'm that sister or that person that's always there, holding space for everybody else, being a rock for everyone else, loving. And not because I don't want to, because I really do. I
Yep.
really do. And so I give so much love. And I do receive love. I think that I do, but maybe I don't. I don't know. I just, you're shaking your head like, no.
Rocks
I-
typically don't allow a lot of love in. And if you're spending a lot of your own energy beating yourself up and feeling disappointed and settling, that's going to block love that everybody has to give to you. No, 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 no. The best days of my life are not ahead. No, 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 no. No, I don't need help. No, I'm okay. Nah, you don't have to go with me there. No, I can handle this on my own. No, I don't look good in this dress. That's not true.
Okay. Yeah, I, I, I do that.
Me too. Or used to. So, what do you think changed when your dad died?
Um, I really don't know. I feel maybe I've always wanted to make him proud of me.
Mm.
Um, and when he died, I felt like I didn't get the chance to do that, and that I never will get the chance to do that. Even though he never said that, he never told me he wasn't proud of me. He actually told me before he passed that he was, but I guess I just didn't really believe it because I wasn't proud of me. And I just never got the chance to really, yeah, I never got the chance to really show him who I could have been, who I believed I could be.
Thank you for going there. That's what happened. You're the one who decided that was the expiration date on you doing and living and being who you want to be. And, there's that term I've seen a lot of people talking about called quiet quitting. It's almost like you quietly quit on your own ambition and your own dreams. And so I want to reclaim that for you, okay? Because what's your dad's name?
Joe.
Joe. Joe's still here.
Mhm.
Joe's watching. Joe is proud of you. This isn't Joe's shit. This is your shit. And here's the great news. You do have your entire lifetime to make yourself proud. And Joe's watching. And so your first assignment for me is I want you to write a letter to Joe, your dad.
Mhm.
And I want you to thank him for being so proud of you. And I want you to tell him that you miss him. And you still feel that he's here. And you thank him for being with you and guiding you. And that you are writing this because you wanted to make a promise to yourself and a promise to him that you are going to go and do some amazing things. In your lifetime. And is he buried somewhere?
Yes.
Is it close by?
Yeah.
I want you to go to his grave with the letter, and I want you to read it to him. Okay?
Yeah.
And one of the things I also want you to do is I want you to think back to your 20s. And I want you to think about the things that you were doing in your 20s before your dad died that you don't do now. What are those things?
Taking more risks.
Great.
I was pursuing some creative things,
Great.
and I don't do that anymore.
Okay, great. So creativity. Because what you're going to put in your letter is, and Dad, one of the things that I promised to you and to me that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back what is the creative stuff you used to do, Ricky?
Acting.
I used to act, and I'm going to sign up for an acting class. I'm going to start going to auditions again. I'm going to join the community theater. I'm going to try out for the summer stock program. Is there anything else that you used to do?
Singing,
I'm going to start singing again.
writing.
Great. Writing. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. That's incredible. And the reason why this is so incredible is because a job change doesn't go deep enough to change what's actually blocking your life force and your happiness. And if I were to have started this conversation by going, hey, you know what you should do? You should just go act. You'd be like, what the fuck? No. But when you can connect it to the fact that there is this vibrancy, this self-expression, this flow and exchange. Because what's interesting about acting and singing, right, and writing, is it's not just you going out, it's the love that comes back in from castmates and audience and musicians and all the people that are collaborating or witnessing that beautiful self-expression. And so that is a perfect pathway for you to change the direction of your life by simply adding in the things that got lost when your life got turned upside down. And I think the act of writing that letter and going to your dad's grave and making a promise to him and to yourself that this is what you're going to put back into your life will be a way bigger deal and a way bigger motivator than any formula that I could ever give you. See, the research shows that in order for somebody to achieve a goal, a dream, or make a change stick, there are two things that have to be present. You have to have the reason why you're doing it, and you've got to have the way or the how you're going to do it. And you're a smart cookie. You know how to audition. You know how to start singing again, whether it's in a church choir or with a group or whatever. You know how to act. You got the way all day long. You got to connect the why back to your dad and back to you giving yourself permission to be happy and to be proud of yourself. That's your why. And when you marry those two things with the step-by-step of just, oh, once a week I got to go to my singing group. Oh, once a week I got to audition for something. Oh, once a week I got. We're done here. Because if you give yourself permission to do that, it will open up so much momentum and energy that you'll change your job like that. You'll start exercising and taking care of yourself. But that's the missing piece.
You know what I just thought of? And so it's just like popped into my head. I used to really, really love working out, and it never felt like a chore. It was just something I loved to do, and I would be running. But when where I found out that my dad had passed away was when I just finished a workout, and I opened my locker and I checked my phone, and so I found out he passed away while I was at the gym. And after that, going to the gym, like, yes, I still went, but it never had the same momentum to it anymore. And I'm just connecting that right now.
That is a beautiful insight, a life-changing one. Because do you remember what happened let's go back to that moment. You open up the locker, you reach in and you grab your phone. And how did you learn?
There was several messages
Okay.
from my sister that were there.
Okay.
And so I called back, and then she had said to me, I told her I was at the gym, and she's like, okay, well, just call me when you get home. And I was like, what's going on? Something in me knew that, because he had been in the hospital at the time, and something in me, I was just like, just tell me, just tell me, just tell me. And then she told me.
See,
And I remember.
yes, you remember because that's a traumatic event in your life.
Mhm.
And it got married with something that you loved to do.
Mhm.
So it makes perfect sense that it pulled the ease and the joy out of the thing that you used to love to do.
Mhm.
But now that you have that incredible self-awareness, I would include that in the letter.
Yeah.
And I know you wouldn't have wanted it, and me to stop doing that, and I didn't either, and I just realized this, and I'm freeing myself of this, and I'm telling you I love you, and thank you for being proud of me, and I'm gonna start running again every day. I'm gonna start doing this. I'm gonna start living again. If you can't afford to go to somebody in functional medicine to get this all tested, how do you figure out what's going on? You have in your new book, Young Forever, you have all of these self-assessments that you can do.
Yeah.
But do you have to have testing at some point, or is there a way for you
To get testing?
have an accessible way?
Yeah.
Because one of the things, I agree with you. I agree with you that our medical approach and the medical system is about treating illness versus
sure.
keeping you healthy and whole. I agree that we treat symptoms, but we have a hard time getting to the root cause.
I agree.
So I just want to, because I know that what's going to happen with this conversation, Dr. Hyman, is that we are going to activate anyone listening to absolutely take the next 10 days of your life and see what happens when you reset your diet and you remove a few things. Absolutely add in those simple supplements that cost you less than $1 a day, and you are worth that investment in yourself, and see what happens. Absolutely take the steps to lower your stress and tap into your body's ability to reset, like even just the 5 deep breaths a day that activate and tone the vagus nerve. But if somebody's going, I want to learn more, what is the next right step?
That's a great question. And one of the challenges I've always had with medicine is it's kind of a secret guild, and doctors hold the reins. They can order the tests or they can't. They will give you the results or they won't. They'll help you interpret them or they won't. And so you're at the sort of whim and mercy of whoever you're seeing. And most doctors do a good job and want to help people, but it kind of kept in a guild. So in the book, Young Forever, I do have really extensive questionnaires that allow you to figure out almost 80% of what's going on.
Yep.
And then depending on what you find in those, you can kind of follow up with different kinds of testing. But because of this problem, exactly that you're talking about, I decided to co-found a company with a good friend called Function Health, which allows you, without a doctor's order, to go to any Quest lab in the country, and there's thousands of them, get a blood draw of over 100 biomarkers that normally cost $15,000 for $500.
Wow.
And it comes with a whole interpretive map and framework and dashboard that's filtered through the lens of functional medicine that I wrote that allows people to not have to go see the doctor and still do 80% of. Or
why the
90%.
hell did I go to your clinic then if I could have just done this, Dr. Hyman? Bearing the lead. No, I'm just kidding. I am just kidding, everybody. I do want to say something that I was able to go to the medical center right here in this tiny town of Manchester, Vermont, and have blood drawn for those tests.
Yeah, right.
And so you don't have to go to your primary care. You don't have to go. All of the minute clinics that are popping up are places where you can go if you're going to do those things to order the blood draws.
Well, the thing is, you have to usually get a doctor's order. So the beautiful thing about Function Health, this company that we created, was that you don't need a doctor's order. So you can go to the website, sign up, and they'll network with over 50 different states, doctors in every one,
I love
where you can
this.
just go and get kind of
The testing done.
Yeah, get the testing done, get your results, and track it over time, and you can see your hormones, your thyroid, your insulin, your like age-related markers, your brain chemistry, so much about what's going on with your
You know
body.
what's so cool about this, if you can afford to do it, and we'll put the link in the show notes, is it's like getting an x-ray of your insides.
Yeah. Yeah,
And you've proven to us that you heal from the inside out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I'm so excited about this approach because it empowers people to be the CEO of their own health. And the reality is that, even if you go to the doctor with all these complaints, they're going to be able to, quote, manage your symptoms. I don't want to manage people's symptoms. I want people to get better. I want people to reverse these problems and not need a doctor. And the truth is, most of the things that work are not things you're going to get at a doctor's office, which is drugs and surgery. So sometimes you need them, and I use them. That's not a bad thing. But most of the problems we have don't respond very well to that. And all these things that we talk about, whether it's depression. I mean, antidepressants just suck. They don't work that well. They have all these side effects. And anxiety medications are highly addictive. I mean, they just cover over the symptoms. What if you could actually figure out why you're having the problem and fix it?
Well, I think you told us why. It's inflammation. It's a gut that's out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
It is the stressors in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It is the toxins in your environment. And not understanding that your body has this elegant design that is super intelligent and responsive and can heal itself if you are conscious and intentional about the right input.
Yeah. And that's what's exciting that's happening now in science is we're actually getting there. Like the old paradigm's dying. And in the longevity space I've been working in, and when I wrote about it Young Forever, where these scientists are now talking about what's underlying all these diseases, these 155,000 diseases, that's not what we need to be thinking about. It's these 10 underlying problems that tend to go wrong as we get older that can explain all disease. And if we treat those, we may not be able to just extend our life by 5 years by getting rid of cancer or heart disease, but by 30 or 40 years. That means living to be 120 and being in good shape. Like, I don't want to live to be 120 in a nursing home in a wheelchair. I want to be able to ride my bike, go for a horseback ride, make love. That's what I want to do when I'm 100 or 120.
Wow. I'm glad that you said that, because oftentimes I hear the word longevity and I had that reaction like, well, I don't want to be rotting away in a nursing home at
Exactly.
like 125. That sounds terrible.
It's terrible because most of what we see, Mel, in the world is abnormal aging. And we think that's normal. Oh, it's normal to become frail and decrepit and not be able to do what you want and lose function. And the truth is that most of us, our health span doesn't equal our lifespan. The last 20 years of our life.
What's the difference between health span and lifespan?
Well, health span is how many years you're healthy and can do what you want. And lifespan is how many years you're alive. So if you're fine until you're 60, then you get dementia and you're nursing home for 20 years. That's not good. So that's what you want to do, is make your health span equal your lifespan. So on my last day, I want to go for a hike with my beloved. I want to come home, make a delicious dinner. I want to have a bottle of wine, probably a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and
wait a minute, that wasn't on the diet.
Who cares? I'm 120, and then I make love and I close my eyes and drift off. And maybe take a jump in the pond.
That sounds incredible. My mother-in-law is 85 years old. She jumps out of airplanes. She walks 5 miles a day.
There you go.
She's having the time of her life. When Chris and I went alcohol free for a bit, she's like, I'm not doing that. Like, I have my 1 glass of red wine a day. That's what I need. She plays cards. She prioritizes friends.
Yeah, exactly.
She is the definition of vitality at that age.
Yeah.
And she's like the Energizer Bunny. I can't imagine her running out of steam. And that's what I think you're talking about when it comes to vitality. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe, because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.